Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at a super cheap case. This is the Aerocool Slipt RGB. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so on today's video we're taking a look at the Aerocool Slipt RGB, which was kindly sent to us by Ugly Bob, so thank you very much Ugly Bob for bestowing this upon the channel. We're going to do a quick unboxing, go through the case itself. I am actually going to put a build in this one to do some thermals because I think this actually does warrant it. Essentially this case is around about £20 here in the UK at the moment, so don't be expecting too much, but certainly if you are a PC flipper or you're looking for an ultra budget build, then this might be just the case for you. Although it is very limited on airflow, as we'll see when we go through the features of it. So you may want to consider what you're actually going to put in this. If you're thinking of putting some high TDP parts in here, then you might need to look elsewhere. But there are also some ways around it, which may involve things like a Dremel or a angle grinder or some kind of cutting tool, which could improve this case considerably. So let's go through the unboxing and the stats and see what it's got to offer. So first of all, what is this? This is a ATX style case. It's slightly old school in the way that it's set up. So we've got a top mounted PSU. We've got some tempered glass on the side, which brings it up to date a little bit. We've got a pretty much a solid front panel, which does have a addressable RGB strip in the front. Now the addressable RGB is kind of all built in. So there's no way of actually controlling it other than the button on the top of the case. And there is also an included 120mm ARGB fan on the back, which connects up with a proprietary connector so you can synchronize it together. Ideally this is going to be going into some system where you don't have RGBs, so maybe some older Intel systems or maybe some lower end AMD systems where you don't have any RGB on the boards. This is going to be absolutely fine, but again there are going to be some TDP restraints on this. So let's start off with the front of the case. So as you can see on the front we've got this front panel which has got a kind of slightly unusual design to it, so it does kind of come out to a point at the center where this addressable RGB strip is. Possibly you've already seen the strip from some B-roll. At the top there's a very small amount of ventilation, and also there is exactly the same at the bottom. On the sides we've got some slotted sections on either side to allow a little bit of airflow, although behind it is where things start running out of steam. Pulling the front panel off is relatively simple, just there's a grab handle at the bottom so you can just pull it off. It is just plastic, so you can remove it. And all of the wiring in its entirety. So looking at the back here, you can see you've got the slotted sections there. There is a cover which covers over the addressable RGB so light won't bleed into the case too much. And at the top here you can see all our connectivity, all pretty exposed, so yeah, with the metal sections on there, just make sure you don't have anything behind there which could potentially short out any of your USBs or your audio ports. Looking closer at the side you can see the ventilation slits there, which aren't going to do a great deal. Obviously this isn't an airflow orientated case, but it will allow some airflow. A slightly nice addition, although very small, is the Aerocool logo in the bottom here, which actually does look quite nice and gives it a slightly more premium look to that front panel. Looking at the connectivity, so all the cables actually have been really nicely blacked out, which is always a good thing to see. So we've got a USB Type 3 header, we've also got a HD audio connection, we've got a USB Type 2, there is a SATA connection, so that is for powering the addressable RGB, and also then you've got your front I/O connection, so hard drive LED, etc, reset switch, all that kind of stuff. And also there is this additional cable which then is like a fly lead which goes towards the fan at the rear, so the two can be linked up. So now we can take a closer look at the front of the case, and as you can see this case design is kind of shared from other designs, and you've obviously got some cutouts here from when you could have put two 5.5-inch drives in. Unfortunately, obviously, because it is a solid front panel, that isn't an option on this one, but I'm guessing there are other versions of this case on the market which will allow drives to be inserted. Also as well, you can see remnants here of where a 3.5-inch bay possibly would have been, and you can see this mounting section here, which is designed really, in some effects, it would be for mounting two 120mm fans. You can see there's little cutouts there, but unfortunately if you do mount them on the front here, they are literally going to be slap bang in front of a piece of solid plastic, so they're going to be absolutely useless for mounting fans on. My consideration is, in this particular instance, would be to use an angle grinder or cutting tool and actually remove those arms around the outside edge and remove this panel altogether, then allowing you to put two fans on the inside. Currently you can't put them on the inside because the fact that this drive mounting area actually is recessed. so you can't physically mount fans on there without hitting on the metal. On the side we've got this full-size tempered glass panel, which is about 3mm thick, so not the thickest of panels, but the whole case itself is actually particularly lightweight. I'll put some specs on the screen so you can see how light it actually is. The side panel itself is held on with 4 thumb screws, but sadly they are a little bit on the cheap side, and there's actually nothing holding the glass in place once you remove the screws. So do be careful if you are planning to do a build in this. Ideally you want to put the case down on a flat surface so the glass can't fall, and as you can see already it's moving across there because there's basically nothing holding it in place. So with the glass panel removed, you can see there's a very slight smoke tint to it, which actually probably will be beneficial to hide up some of the potential ugliness inside. So now we can see inside the case and got a pretty good look. There's actually quite a lot of room in here. You can mount 2 3.5-inch drives, so one of which will be mounted on this front panel, one onto the actual basement section or the bottom, and you can mount 2 2.5-inch drives. There's a section here and here which is designed specifically for that purpose, so you could actually put 4 drives in there, plus obviously also any M.2 drives that you may have, again depending on what sort of motherboards you plan to put in this thing. In terms of actually pass-throughs and cutouts and that kind of stuff, it isn't too bad considering the fact that we have got an internally mounted top PSU mount. Normally most of the cables are going to kind of terminate up in this section here. So I'll take this back panel off, which the back panel actually is particularly flimsy. Not a great deal of flex to it, but virtually no weight to it at all. So now the back panel's off, you can see all the pass-throughs. So you've got a huge cutout here for CPU mounting, backplates, that kind of stuff. There's a pass-through up here for passing through your power supply cables that you don't need or you want to route elsewhere. Also as well, you've got pass-throughs here and here for your main ATX style connectors and possibly your USB 3 headers. On this side section, you've got some cutouts there, so depending where you mount your 2.5-inch drives on this plate, you can pass the SATA and the data cables through to the back. At the bottom, there's 2 pass-throughs for HD audio or USB connections, although because of the way this case is designed, a full-size ATX motherboard will actually come down to pretty much the very bottom. So careful planning before you actually get started. Ideally put your HD audio and your USB cables and possibly your IO cables down through those holes before you actually put the motherboard in, just so you can pass them through easily. Also included in the case, as you can see here at the back, is a Aerocool ARGB fan. Calling it ARGB is kind of misleading because it's not addressable. Technically it is because you can address each individual LED, but obviously you can't really address it other than pressing the button on the front of the case, so yeah, it's not really that flexible a fan. Also as well, sadly the fan uses a Molex connector to get power, so there's no control of the RPM, so it is literally one static speed. And actually the fan itself, I did notice when I powered it up a little bit earlier, there is a definite click into it, which you'll hear a demonstration of now. The fan itself, as you can see, is there's a little bit of movement there, up and down very slightly, but there's not really a great deal else other than that. Looking at the back plates, there is one removable backplate on the back for the PCI Express. All the others are those typical kind of fold out and remove ones, so if you pop them out, they're not going to go back in, you'd need to chuck them in the bin. If for some reason you wanted to then blank them out after, you'd have to go and buy separate blanking plates. Looking at the back of the PC, you can see this is the cutout for the ATX power supply. Of course, this is an ATX style chassis, so if you want to, you can put an ATX motherboard in here. Also, it will support micro ATX and also ITX boards should you see the need. Also on the back is this plate, which is usual deal, so undo the screw and then it gives you access to these. I'm really not sure why they bother even putting these on these days. It's just pretty ugly and pretty awful to work with. Moving around to the back of the case, we can see there is actually a kind of a cable management channel which goes along this section here and down, in which there is around about 3/4 of an inch of depth there for storing cables. When it comes to the back section here where the motherboard is, you're going to be a little bit more careful because there isn't a great deal of room, so ideally a power supply with flat cables or just avoid this section entirely. When it comes to that, obviously certain things like your supplementary CPU power, which goes into the top of the board, is going to come pretty much straight out the top of the power supply, so you might want to sort of bring it out here and then bring it back in just to lose some of that cabling. In terms of cable management, there are a few cable tie-down points. We've got one here, 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 and there's a couple dotted around as well. Although this section here for cable management is going to be exceptionally close. There's literally only a few millimeters of cable room there. So again, if you are planning to use these channels for cable management, you are going to have to be careful. Although, as you've possibly seen from the B-roll already, the actual back panel which slots on isn't flat. There is a kind of hump to it, so that will give you a little bit of wiggle room should you need it. Looking at the bottom here, things don't get particularly better. There's mounting holes there for the 3.5-inch drive, which can be mounted on that bottom section. And you'll probably notice already there are literally no feet to it. You've got these kind of stamped out parts here, which do raise it up off the ground slightly, but it's just metal pressed. It would have been nice, really, just to add a couple of rubberized feet or something on there, just to raise it off the floor a little bit. Although there's not going to be really any airflow as such, maybe a little bit from the cutout from the front panel, which would be here. It's not really going to be a great deal of expense to add a couple of feet on here, I think, in my opinion. Moving on to the top, things aren't much better than the bottom, sadly, and the top section, as you can see, is a completely solid panel. Now, I guess this kind of makes sense. There's no real point of going to the expense of actually machining it and cutting out a section here, being that your power supply is going to be pretty much covering up this bit. The only other place really would be found here for a single 120mm fan, possibly. Cooling is not one of the things which was in the forefront of their minds when designing this box, that's for sure. So that's pretty much it for the case itself. Next really is the I/O. So taking a look at the front again. So we've got a power button, there's a reset switch, your LED button for cycling through the RGB colors. We've got some LEDs there for hard drive activity, etc. And also there's a USB Type 2 ×2, headphone and mic jacks, and also a single USB Type 3 socket. So I think that's pretty much it for the case. Components that are going to be going into this is going to be the MSI B450 Pro-A. We're also going to be putting in here an APU. It's going to be the Ryzen 5 3400. Also, possibly a hard disk drive in the bottom section, maybe a SATA drive in the side section. I have got an NVMe drive, which I might just stick on the board anyway. I don't think it's really going to be much benefit to show you guys how the drives are installed. It's pretty straightforward. They just screw in, so I think that's probably going to make the build a little bit more untidy. So ideally, if you can, stick with M.2 drives. Your life will be considerably easier, especially when it comes to cable management. We're not going to be putting a graphics card in this, purely for the reason that at the moment, really, graphics cards pretty much aren't available anyway. There's a lot of APUs on the market right now and some exciting things coming from AMD very shortly. So again, depending on what you've got, if you've got an older Intel system which has got onboard graphics, then you may well go with that. Of course, if you want to, you can put a graphics card in here, but it is just going to add more to that thermal load, which this case is going to struggle with regardless. So let's get on with the build. Okay, so we've done the build, as you've probably seen from some of the brief montage that we put together. It's not the simplest of cases to work in, let's be completely honest. The top section for a power supply is showing its age a little bit, and it does certainly add a little bit of complexity and confusion to this build. There was definitely some suitcase moments on the back panel trying to get it back on, even though possibly you've already seen from some of the footage of the wiring I did. I tried to do it as neat as possible. I've also used a modular power supply and removed pretty much anything which wasn't required. And still, it was a little bit of a pig to try and get that back on. But saying that, once it's on and it does its job. It's just not the simplest of builds. So temperature-wise, we've got a Ryzen 5 3400G in here. We haven't got a graphics card, as we said. If you want to, you can put a graphics card in here up to 325mm. Cooling-wise, we've gone with the Antec A30, which was kindly sent to us for review purposes, so you'll be finding more about that up in a later video. But actually, in there you can put up to 155mm cooler, so you could put something in there like the Snowman coolers, that kind of thing, the 120mm, which again you can check out from the reviews up here. Quite a lot of room in there actually to work in on the motherboard. Where the motherboard comes down to the very bottom, it is a little bit tricky. I end up running the cables from the side and round rather than behind. That was just a little bit too complex for me to cope with on this one, so went for the path of least resistance. And talking of the path of least resistance, surprisingly there's actually some airflow in this case, which as demonstrated with a cigarette paper, the ventilation on the side here, put it on the side there, and it holds it in. So that means it nearly left it. As you can see, even in the lower places, it is actually pulling air through for those vents. Bearing in mind, we've only technically got one case fan, which is the addressable RGB one on the back, and we're only using the PSU as an exhaust. Temperature wise for the processor, I tried it with the glass panel on and with it off to see if there was any actual real restrictions on the cooling, and to be honest with you, there was only about 2 degrees difference, so I would almost put that down to margin of error, although obviously it is going to be a little bit cooler with the side panel off. Anyone who's owned a PC and has used it in the summer will tell you that as well. So top temperatures, we're looking around like 71 degrees. This is with the Ryzen 5 3400G, running Cinebench and basically maxing out around about 3850 megahertz. Didn't do any overclocking or anything, just left it pretty much stock, precision boost overclocking, that kind of thing left on. So 71 degrees with the side panel on, and around about 68, 69 degrees with the side panel off. So again, very, very close temperatures. The lowest temperatures recorded, actually at the moment I've left this running, it's currently idling, and it's just dropped down to 29 degrees, which I think was pretty much exactly the same as what it had with the side panel off. So yeah, 29, 30 degrees, totally acceptable and pretty decent temperatures for that kind of chip, especially with a relatively modest cooler. So I guess it's time to really summarize what I think of this case. Now this isn't for everybody, it really isn't. There is definitely a market segment out there for this case. Unfortunately, my particular segment, where I feel most comfortable in, this isn't it. Really, you're better off, in my personal opinion, spending maybe another £15 and getting something a little bit different. Maybe one of the Ions cases. Those will certainly give you a little bit more bang for your buck. It is nice the fact we've got this addressable RGB front on here, and also the fan on the back, as you've probably seen again from some of the B-roll. It's not inherently a bad case, but there are certainly limitations. Cable management wise on the back isn't great. The layout internally leaves a little bit to be desired, especially for passing through cables, and yeah, there's just too many things for me that you have to take into consideration. If I was going to be suggesting this case to somebody, it would be somebody who does PC flipping as a regular thing. Someone who's well versed in all the kind of issues that you can come up with building a PC. If it's someone who's buying or building their first PC, I would strongly advise against this. There's too many things which can cause issues or cause problems or just don't really work that easily. There certainly are much easier cases to work on out there. There really, really is. So for around about £20, I think, again, target market is going to be fine. PC flippers, you're going to see this kind of PC case on eBay and pre-built systems all day long. But for new builds, I think really you need to spend a little bit more money. But anyway, thank you very much to Ugly Bob for sending this case for review purposes. He said that I can do what I like with it after I've finished with it, so I'm not entirely sure, but if anyone's interested and they would like to take it off my hands, obviously minus the pits inside, then please do let us know in the comment section or join us on our Discord chat. So this has been the Aerocool Slipt RGB. Yeah, my opinion is split on it also. I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.